part of this where it gives you satisfaction?
To meet someone like this young lady here who said that she was in the program, and then to see them years later, and they're doing well on her way to graduate from high school in a couple of years, and to know that every day you can do something with young children that if you do it well, will have an impact upon them for the rest of their lives. And they've done a lot of research on Head Start. It's been around, as you know, a long time. And the research shows this: the children who have been in Head Start, they graduate from high school in far greater numbers than children who haven't had the experience. They're less likely to end up in the criminal justice system as adults. They end up having jobs that allow them to take care of their families, to own homes, more likely to go to college. And the one that really impressed me is that they and their brothers and sisters are healthier. In this country, you've probably heard of the infant mortality rate. Infant mortality rate measures the number of children who are born that die in the first year of life. That's called the infant mortality rate. It's a way you can judge healthcare in any country. You know, say what infant mortality rate is, let's say 40 children that die out of 1,000 that are born. I mean, those are just numbers I'm making up. That's a figure that's used to determine health care and how good or bad it is in any country, in any city. Well, there's also something called the childhood mortality rate. Childhood mortality rate measures the number of children who die between the ages of 5 and 8. Again, that's the way in which you can tell how well your health care system is working. The lower the number, the better the health care system is working. The higher the number tells you you've got problems. About 4 years ago, there was information came out that said that Head Start was responsible for lowering the childhood mortality rate for the entire country. And that's amazing because most children who are in that age group, 5 to 8, were not in Head Start. Correct. They weren't in Head Start. You say, well, how did Head Start do that? Well, one of the things that happens is that Head Start, let's say, you have brothers and sisters?
Yes, I do.
Older, younger?
One's younger, 2 older sisters.
Okay. What they found out is that if you had been in Head Start, that the benefit of Head Start is passed on. You would pass that on to your brothers and sisters. So information that you receive, you come home and talk about what you did in school and share it with your family. So the information that parents and children received in Head Start, what's required to live a healthy lifestyle. Like make sure you follow up on your immunizations. You have these shots that you're supposed to take in sequence that will prevent you from getting certain diseases. Making sure that you do go to the dentist and establishing good health habits early, that has had an impact upon the entire country. Here, who've gone through Head Start and done well. You ever heard of the name Esperanza Spalding?
No.
Okay, Esperanza Spalding is a musician, a very fine musician. She won a Grammy for the best new artist. She was in our Head Start program. So yeah, she's in our Head Start right here in Portland, Oregon. And she's a musical who do well like that, but all the folks that I've seen, I've been around long enough to see young people now who have nice careers, who have strong families, and many of them credit it to what they learned or what they did learn in Head Start. So that's it. And the idea that you can do something today that will really help a child and their family for years to come, such as talking to children about college. That doesn't happen for a lot of children. No one's talking about college at 3 or 4 years old. We can do that. And what we also did to reinforce that, one of our former Head Start graduates who was graduating from the University of Oregon about 3 years ago, I asked her to manage a project for her. What she did was wrote off to colleges, not only in Oregon, but all across the country, and asked them for sweatshirts we got these sweatshirts, and she found a friend of hers who was a photographer. We put these college sweatshirts on these 3 and 4-year-old children and took a picture of it, made it into a poster. So you see these little kids with University of Oregon, Yale, Oregon State, and several other colleges, and talking about it says, college begins with albino Head Start. So it reinforces, it's a cute picture, and we gave it to the parents, but it reinforces the idea that this is where your child is going to be in about 12, 13, 14 years. The other one, you asked me what's exciting. I'm not sure if you know, or are you familiar with one of the major languages in the world. It's called Mandarin. Are any of y'all familiar with Mandarin?
Yeah.
Isn't it like a China, like
Exactly right.
Yeah.
In China. It's one of the major languages that's spoken in China, Mandarin. It's probably the language spoken by most people in the world, because you've got literally 1 billion people who live in China. So given how influential, how important China is in the world today, China as a country owns more of the United States debt than any other country. Right. A lot of people don't know that. This country has to borrow money to make its budget work. You hear other stuff. Let's talk about the deficit now. That when they do a budget to run the country, they realize they don't have enough money. So where do I get it? I go borrow it. And where do they borrow? What country do they borrow from the most? China. So go ahead.
Don't they owe China like a lot of money?
Big money.
Trillions of dollars.
Yes.
And what happens if they don't pay it back?
It'd be just probably what China would do, it restructure the loan. Say, okay, the interest on the loan that you can't pay is, let's say, 3%, and it was due in, let's say, 15 years. What I will do is restructure the loan and say, all right, I'll extend the loan. I'll give you 30 years, but I'm gonna raise the interest to 6%. So they're making a lot more money off the loan. They would restructure the loan. Because China, it's not in China's interest that the United States that they foreclose on them, because that's the worst thing. It would harm their economy, the economy of the world. So we thought that for our children in Head Start, people Mandarin. So we got, through a lot of snooping around, hard work, we were able to get a teacher from China who works in one of our Head Start programs now and is teaching young kids Mandarin. Yeah, right now. Yes, ma'am.
What made you want to start working with kids?
I guess because when I grew up there, and I was much younger than you, but at your age also, there were always people who helped me. They weren't getting paid for it. There were people I grew up in a little town in Kansas, a rural town in Kansas, and there were always adults who encouraged me, who helped me, and I saw our family do that with people also. My grandmother, when I grew up, it was at a time when this country prevented by law black people from doing several things by law. You could not go to this swimming pool, you could not go to this theater. When I was a young kid like you, if I went to a theater, I had to sit up in the balcony. I couldn't sit down at the lower level. That was just for white people. And so it was your options of what you could or couldn't do were quite limited, even if you had an education. But all of our teachers, all the people we came in contact, encouraged us to do well. When I was in grade school, our teachers talked to us about college then. This is we're doing with the little kids now. First, second grade, our teachers talked to us about college. These are all black teachers. At that time, they did not allow black teachers to teach white kids. They could only teach black kids. So our black teachers talked to us about college. Obviously, all of them were college graduates. I'll never forget one of my teachers, second grade teacher. She's passed away, but I used to always tell her that when I became an adult. It was Miss Guess. She talked about how difficult it was to go to college because her family had very little money. She said, I only had my first semester in college. I only had one dress, one blouse, and 2 blouses. But every night, I washed out one of those blouses. And the message was, you may not have money, You may not be able to buy all the clothes in the world. There's no reason that you should ever be unhygienic, that you should ever be unclean. And it also meant that for something important in life, you will have to sacrifice to get it. It may not be easy, but you'll have to sacrifice. You'll have to give up some things. So those are the lessons that we learned when we were 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years old. And you hear the same thing in Sunday school, the importance of education. And it's a little black church, and the people who made the honor roll, if there was some black kid in town who made the honor roll, they got as much recognition as the kids who were star athletes. You know how you introduce your star athletes and assemblies and stuff like that? Well, in Sunday school and church, if there was some black kid in town who made the honor roll, they got as much attention and adulation and applause, and maybe even more so, than the athletes who scored college without paying. My grandparents, I was raised by my grandparents. My grandparents raised my sister and I at the time I was in the 5th grade, and we had so little money, they had to put us on welfare. Right. So that's why I have very strong feelings about people. They say that, well, people on welfare are lazy, don't want to work. That's not true. Welfare is what you use when you have nothing else to survive. That was our experience. And I did not want to be a burden on my grandparents. So when I got out of college, I joined an organization you probably never heard of. You've heard of the Peace Corps, right? Peace Corps? Peace Corps. Peace Corps. Not quite. Peace Corps was an organization set up by President John Kennedy in the early 60s, in which took young Americans, most of them were college age or older, who volunteered 2 years of their lives to go work in countries all around the world, which would work with ordinary communities, and they would either help people to learn English, or they would help people learn how to grow their crops better, or help design road systems. But they volunteered. They paid very, very little money, and they would do that for 2 years. And the idea was to help young people understand that in life it's good that if you have certain privileges, it's good that you give back and go into countries where they don't have as much as you, but you try to help countries and people develop. There was another organization that was created called VISTA, and it's VISTA. That's the acronym. It stands for Volunteers in Service to America. And the idea was to get young people and have them to work in low-income communities here in this country. So you didn't have to go overseas. We certainly have enough low-income communities in America where you could work and help people. What would you do? Well, the idea was the same thing. Could you volunteer in a school? Could you help people organize in the community so they could get better services? So my aunt told me about this. This is be like April 1965. I'm about to graduate in a month from junior college. And I thought, hey, this is my ticket out. I wrote off and said I would like to join. They accepted my application, and I went through VISTA training to college in northern Michigan, right on the shore of Lake Superior. So I was trained, obviously, I come from a little small town. I was trained to work in a rural community. I got assigned to southern New Jersey. You heard about all the Sandy, the floods. So I used to work in that area. It's in the very tip of New Jersey. It's called Whitesboro. But the town you may have heard of is called Cape May Court. It's very, very, town I worked in is very, very poor. It's all black town, strangely enough, called Whitesboro. Very, very poor. And my job at that time was to help people prepare for an election in which they would decide how they were going to use this money. Remember I talked about the war on poverty?
Yeah.
Well, they made money available to communities that you could use to address either high unemployment, poor housing, job creation, that money, communities could vote on how to use that money to address those concerns. Well, that was my job. I lived with a minister and his wife, and I went around telling people, hey, look, this money's coming, here's how you can use it to address the concerns. I got a phone call one night at that house in which the people who were sponsoring us, which was the state of New Jersey, they said, you have to leave the state, you're being kicked out of the state. Right. So I said, why? They said, you've been involved in politics. I could barely spell politics at the time. But what I figured years later, white people in politics and other places, black people had never had that experience. So 3 other business volunteers and myself, we got kicked out of the state. So the feature is, I'm coming from a little small town in Kansas, going to a little smaller town in New Jersey. You know where I got transferred? East Harlem, New York City. Right, that's where I got transferred to, East Harlem, New York City. We took a bus from this little bitty, they had one bus stop, and drove up to, anybody ever been to New York City? No? Okay, the place where the bus stops, it's called Port Authority. That's where all the buses come into and get off. Now I'm trained to organize in East Harlem. And the job that I had, I was trained to become a block worker. One block would be, you see across the street here?
Yeah.
If you can imagine, these are apartment buildings on this side of the street, that side of the street, and from this corner to the next corner. In that one area, there'd be about 4,000 people. Right. Yeah, in that one area. So my job was to go around to everybody that lived there, every apartment, knock on the door, and say, my name is Ronnie Herndon. I'd like to come back and talk to you about what we can do and what you'd like to see change on this block. The majority of the people on the block, probably 65%, were Puerto Rican. Maybe 20% were black, the other primarily white. So obviously people from Puerto Rico spoke Spanish, so I still have somewhere my little flyer that said Spanish and English, 1965, and I passed out and said, my name, yo soy Ronnie Herndon, I'd like to come back. So after you go around and drop that off, then you go back and see if they'll let you in and talk. What would you like to see? Well, this block had a lot of drug addicts. Heroin was there then, a lot of prostitution. You had people who lived in apartments. Landlords did not take care of them. Rats, roaches, women who heard their babies really scream in the middle of the night to go in and find a rat in a bassinet with a baby. Babies are dead by rats. Rats are attracted, if babies go to sleep, they have milk on their mouth. Rats are attracted to the smell of the milk, and they end up biting kids. So one of the things that this gets back to the kids, it's a long story, but one of the things that we did, landlords did not want to improve. They figured, you pay the rent, I'm not going to change anything. In the middle of winter, you may not have any heat, it gets really cold. So we organized and had what's called a rent strike. And I think back how brave the adults were. Rent strike means this: if all of us live in the building, right? What we tell the landlord, what we did first, we have to decide we're not going to pay the landlord any money. But what we'll do, we'll set up a bank account, and every month, rather than pay the landlord, we will take our money and we'll put it in this bank account. You fix up when you give us heat, when you get rid of the rats, the roaches, when you paint this building, then we will give you this money. But until then, we're not going to give you the money. Now I think the older I get, the more I think about how brave these adults had children. And you can be evicted for not paying rent. And in New York, they were very cruel. I've seen instances in which you haven't paid your rent, they'll get a court order, and the marshals will come up to your apartment, take everything that you have and set it down on the street next to the garbage can and put a lock on the door. I've seen women with young kids, their couch right on the edge of the street, sitting on their couch in the middle of winter, nowhere to go, been thrown out. So these folks are so brave that they said, we will risk being thrown out, being evicted, to get our building fixed, because it means enough to us that we live in a decent place. So we had 2 successful rent strikes, 2 different buildings, in which people came together and forced the landlord to fix the holes, to get rid of the roaches, to get rid of the rats, and paint the building. So that really influenced me. I was lucky enough to hear Martin Luther King speak when I was living in New York. With all the big the war in Vietnam was big then. Several of us were involved in a big march against the war, and Martin Luther King was the featured speaker. So because of all those things, I felt that given the fact that so many people helped me, I need to give back. I came out here to finish my last 2 years of college. I came out here in August 1968. I was lucky enough to get a scholarship at a school called Reed here in Portland. It was a scholarship set up for minority students. Through that experience, which wasn't, that's another story. You want to hear more about Head Start. So anyway, as I'm getting ready to graduate from college.
No, it's fine. I was enjoying it.
Oh, you were? Okay. In 1970, we decided to set up a school in the black community of Portland for kids because we thought that they weren't getting an opportunity to learn about their history, their culture. We could do a decent job. The school started in the summer, then eventually became a full-time independent school from K through 5, which we taught reading, writing, math, and also gave children a sense of who are they? Where do you come from? Do you know much about your past? Do you know anything that occurred in Africa other than slavery? You know that some of the original civilizations in the world were started by black people. That black people were very involved in the Egyptian civilization, the civilizations in Ghana, Mali, Songhai, Congo. And do you know what happened then? So that kids at a young age get some sense of who am I? Where do I fit into the world? So through that, that's how I got to Head Start. When I worked there, I worked as a volunteer. And then even though I was directing the program, I didn't get paid. I worked also at school for high school dropouts. I was laid off at the school for dropouts. And during the time I was laid off, Head Start parents came to me and said, hey, we want you to be the director of our program. The other director is no longer there. Will you be the director of our program? I'll know along the way, and I'm out of work. So Head Start parents recruited me. They're the ones that did me the favor. And I've been with Head Start ever since. That was 1975. It's a long way around the outhouse, but one question. That's how it happened.
Okay, let's see. Who are the people you look up to?
Initially, it would have been my grandparents, the ones who raised my sister and myself, because they didn't have to do it. They were, I think about that, they were in next month, all things being equal, my next birthday, I'll be 67 years old. At an age younger than me, probably in their early 60s, that's when they took my sister and I in. They didn't have to do that. My grandfather had gotten hurt working on a job, so he was retired. My grandmother, the only job that black women could get was working in rich white people's houses. That's what she did to make a living. So even though they had so little, they took us in. I think so they're really my heroes. They didn't have to do it. And all the people who lived next door that helped us across the street, gave us a ride to school, didn't have to do it. So the people that I met who looked out for me when I was much younger than you, those really are my heroes. And those and older people who took pride in your accomplishments. If you made the honor roll, and I did, because I worked hard, they congratulate, oh, great, you made the honor roll. I encourage you. So those, and didn't have to do it. People who found out that you like to play baseball, give you a baseball glove. You know, you're pretty good baseball. I was a pretty good baseball player. So here, take this glove, you can use it. So people who did not have to help me, they didn't get paid to help me, that wanted to encourage you. The guys who you thought you see on the corner might be winos, but they knew you were trying to do good in school, encouraged you to go to college. I heard you on the radio in the basketball game, good job. That kind of encouragement that people didn't have to give. So those are people that you will never hear of, but ultimately, for me in my life, those are my heroes.
So I read that you were working with Congress.
Yes.
How have they helped the Head Start program?
They've allocated over the years more money. Now Head Start receives approximately, let's say round numbers, close to $9 billion to serve basically 1 million children in this country. When I first started in my position as president and chairman of the board of the National Head Start Association, I think we were getting maybe $3 billion and served far less children. So the money comes from Congress and the president. So we've seen a substantial increase in funding. A number of things have been done to make it easier for Head Start programs to manage. And laws have been passed, regulations that have happened over the years. For many, many years, up until approximately 1988, Head Start programs could not own property. They couldn't build, so you were forced to continue to rent. They could build the program, build their own centers, or they could renovate the center and buy it. So a lot of regulations we've seen change that have helped Head Start programs.
So as the chairman, you like represent the Head Start community needs to the Congress?
Yes, at times I have, yes. I've testified before Congress, yes, and met with members of Congress, yes. Yeah, I remember meeting, remember Bill Clinton, President Clinton? I remember meeting him when he was governor of Arkansas. We were on the committee. This would have been about 1990. That was talking about what can we do to help young children do better in school. And we were both on that committee. He was in chair. One of the meetings was held in Arkansas at the Capitol. And they had a dinner reception for those of us on the committee. After the reception was over, it started raining. We had a van to take us back to the hotel. So one group went back to the hotel, so the other group were just standing around with him. And so I just started talking to him, because there were people who grew up in Kansas from Arkansas. I said, you know, this time. So he and I were just talking just like this. He was showing me the map, and finally said, tell you what, I'll drive you back to the hotel. I said, the van, it's no. So he took us back through the kitchen, and guess who we bumped into? His wife, Hillary, and Chelsea. She was a young girl then. And I felt bad, because the kitchen wasn't that big. And here we are, they're sitting down at the table eating, and about 6 of us come walking through. And his security, which is a state police officer, said, hey, Governor, we need help? No. So he drove us back to, who was then governor, drove us back to the hotel. And the next day we were in a meeting, and I had heard that he might run for president. He was in a meeting with some of the leading experts on early childhood education in this country. These are all PhDs, except for me. I'm there because of Head Start. And he ran the meeting by himself, no staff people, and he knew about education. And I remember telling somebody, I said, I don't know if this guy would ever run for president or not, but I'll tell you what, he's the smartest person, smartest politician I've ever seen about education. He's smart. So years later, when he did run for office, I said, hey, and they had the inauguration. I said, the guy that just got inaugurated president, he drove me back to the hotel years ago when he was governor. So yeah, I have met and worked with members of Congress, and that case a future president.
What do you want your legacy to be?
I never think about that, because you can't. None of us, I don't think, can control what people think about us or write about us when we're dead. You can't control that. I think what you do is while you're alive, do the things that you think are important to you at that point in time, and do them as well as you can. That's all we can control. You can control that. You can control how you do this report. You can control what questions you ask today, how you write it. You can't control tomorrow, nor can I. You can't control, prepare for tomorrow. Like going to the dentist, you're preparing for tomorrow because you want to have some good chocolates for the rest of your life. You're preparing. You make sure that you have good glasses so that you don't ruin your eyes. You're preparing for tomorrow. We can prepare. I think we should. But I'm not smart enough to ever guess what my legacy will be. As a matter of fact, I don't care. This might sound strange. I don't care. What I care about is what I do today, and am I doing it well, and am I giving people an opportunity so they might do well in the future. I can concentrate on that, but thinking about, well, I better do this because that'll be part of my legacy, I think it's funny. I do, because I've had that question asked before, when people a lot older than you, and supposed to be a lot smarter than you, I say the same thing, it'll take care of itself, whatever it is, and I'm not worried about it now. So I don't care. Yes, ma'am.
I know this is not about the Head Start thing, but how did you feel about there was like a black president running for president? A black
Well, I'll
person.
tell you how I feel. Have you heard of Jesse Jackson?
Yeah.
Okay, you know, first black, well, there's a woman named Shirley Chisholm, who really was the first serious black candidate. She ran for the presidency in '72. She was a black congresswoman from Brooklyn, New York. Didn't get many votes, but she was one of the first. And Jesse Jackson first ran in '84. Well, I was his campaign chair in Oregon. We created an organization, made a different people organization, the Rainbow Coalition. I was the chair of it. I ended up being a delegate to the 1984 Democratic Convention in San Francisco when he was running for president. I was an Oregon delegate. So even then, the possibility of Jesse being elected was pretty slim, but we thought it was important more than just him because the campaign gave us an opportunity to raise a lot of different issues in the country. Like people not being treated fairly, not enough being done to help people get jobs, housing, possibilities for people going to college. So that was an opportunity to do that. So when Senator Barack Obama ran the first time, honestly, I didn't think he would get it. I didn't think the country would do it. I have to admit to you, I did not think the country would do it. When he was elected, I never thought I'd live to see this day. When a black person being elected, I never thought I'd live to see the day. So obviously very proud, thinking about all the people who fought to make that happen. King and all the other folks, you know, you're talking about Frederick Douglass, hundreds of years people fought for this possibility for it to happen. I was overwhelmed. I didn't think I'd see it and then be reelected. I thought that would happen. I'll tell you why. His people around him, the campaign that he ran in '08 was probably the smartest campaign that's been run in my lifetime, mainly because of the way they use technology, the way that they use Facebook, Twitter, and other social media. I mean, the way in which they did it. At that time, no one had ever run a campaign like that. And as a matter of fact, the Republicans copied him and what he did in terms of how to reach out to people during this past campaign. But here's the deal. People use technology. Technology always continues to get better. As president in 208 to try to get something done in 212, you're going to be in front of me. Because I don't think they had this gadget in 208. And right. So if I'm using what I had in 208, which is probably a BlackBerry, I thought I was really doing it back then. I'm at the front of the crew. I'm at the front of the line, and I'm up against you, and you have this, and you have the mini iPad, and then you have all this other stuff. And I think I'm gonna compete. So that's why I thought he would win this time, because the people around his campaign are very smart. They run smart campaigns, and that's what I said. I said I think he'll win because he knows how to run a great campaign. I didn't know about all this stuff that's come out now, about all the technology that they use, all the information they were using to almost identify every potential voter, stay in touch with them. It's genius. And people will be studying this campaign for many during your lifetime. The campaigns will be built upon the way in which they use technology. So I thought, for that reason, I thought he'd run a great campaign. Whoever the Republicans put up against him, I thought that he and the people around it would run a great campaign. And they did. Yes, ma'am.
How many organizations do you have, like organizations like Head Start?
Right now, over the years, I was in Portland, helped create several different organizations. And for me, if you start an organization, if you're able to get people to the point they can run it without you, that's great. And that's always my goal. Can I move away on other people able to continue to manage the organization? Some I've been successful with, some not so successful with. But right now, I limit myself to just Head Start here in Portland and nationally. The work I do with National Head Start Association takes up a lot of time. Like yesterday, we had a national board conference call. So that took 2 hours plus the time spent preparing for it. And we do it using, you ever heard of a software called GoToMeeting? GoToMeeting. You can look at, you're smart. GoToMeeting is web-based software that you can use to have a meeting via the internet and a computer. So we have a 49-member board, so all of us were on a telephone, plus we had a computer screen that had the agenda up there, had documents. If we're talking, and I say that, here, I want you all to take a look at this freedom fighter project at Roosevelt High School. Then on the screen would be a description of your project, and everybody could see it. So concentrating on what we do with Congress and administration through the National Historic Association and the program we have here in Portland, it takes up all my time. I'm not smart enough to do a lot of other things at the same time. So just two now, Head Start here, Head Start nationally.
How do you stay so helpful towards the children in Head Start?
I try to always learn from you. I will learn from this experience, listening to you, and I always try to learn when I'm around other people. And my mother taught my sister and I how to read before we got to kindergarten. So I always read a lot, and I try to read different magazines. I guess because my grandparents I talked about didn't have much money, they always subscribed to at least 3 newspapers. The local newspaper, a little town I lived in. Then the biggest towns around, Tulsa, Oklahoma was a big paper. Or the daily newspaper that came from Kansas City, another big town. And a weekly paper, a black newspaper that came out weekly from Kansas City. Plus, there was a magazine that's no longer around called Life magazine, came out monthly. There was a black magazine called Ebony that came out monthly. That always came into our home. And so I was in an environment in which reading was just as natural as dribbling a basketball. And I would read, so they taught me at the youngest age, just like we're doing children now, the importance of reading. And not just one kind of document. I forced myself to read business publications. When I pick up the Oregonian, years ago I learned it's important to know what's going on in the business community because it impacts everything we do. So I had to force myself. I'd much rather read the sports page, but I forced myself to read the business page. I forced myself to read business publications. If you've never heard of it, a magazine you may want to read every now and then. It's called The Economist. The Economist is probably one of the best magazines in the world because it tells you what's happening all over the world, country by country. And we should know about the world. You should know about the world, not just Portland, not just Multnomah County, not just the state of Oregon. Because as you grow, in very few years, things that happen in the world will influence your life. And you should understand, have some understanding what's occurring. What's happening in China. They just had a change in government in China. They've announced new people who are going to be leading that country. You should know about that and begin to guess how that's going and understand how that impacts your life. Things that are occurring in Europe right now impact what's occurring in our country. They're going through some pretty tough times in those countries. You should understand why. What's happened there? How is that going to influence me? When I make a career choice, which you will, very few years, you're going to make a career choice. What am I going to do to make a living? If I have a family, how will I be able to take care of my family? So as you make a career choice, are you going to choose a career that has a future? Or are you going to choose a career that may not have a future? And the only way that you're going to make a good decision is you have a lot of information. To give you an example, when the combustion engine came around, that's the engine that you have in automobiles, at the turn of the century, last century, 1900s, turns into the year, let's say it was 1800s, now it's 19. At the end of the 1800s, this combustion engine comes along, okay? Let's say you were sitting in a school. Before that, how did they do transportation? What did they use to move people around before the engine came along?
Horses.
Right, horses. And what jobs could you get when horses were around? What kind of job could you get to make a living when they had
Railroad workers.
what?
Like train track workers.
Train track workers. What else?
Teachers.
Well,
Well, maids.
it's connected to a horse. What could you
My
you
horse,
get a job doing?
Blacksmith.
Perfect. Blacksmith. What else? People make the wagons, right? People make the wheels. They call them wheelwrights. You'd be a jockey, right? Now, when the combustion engine came along, do you think you'd want to study to be a blacksmith or wheelwright? What would you want to study to be?
More of an engineer.
Right. You want to be a person who understands engines, who can design cars, trucks. So that's what I mean about being aware of what's in the world, what's occurring, so that you can get in front and not be left behind. We don't need a lot of blacksmiths now, right? We don't need a lot of jockeys now. We don't need a lot of people to make those old wagons that bump down the street. But we need engineers who know something about astrophysics. You need people who know how to design this, which is going to be more and more part of your life, who know how to create the software, who know how to market it. Those are the jobs. That's what I mean by being able to gather information from around the world, because that's who you're going to compete with young people. There are young people right now in classes just like this all around the world, and that's going to be your competition. So you should know your competition. What are you up against? What do I need to do to be able to compete well against them? Because kids in China, they are studying English, and kids in Europe, those who are in so-called Western Europe, they said that by 1984, all their high school graduates had to be able to speak, read, and write 3 languages. By 1984, right? Read, write, and speak 3 languages. We don't even do well speaking and teaching children 1 language. That's how far we're behind. So you have to know that, so you know what you can do on your own to catch up and get ahead. That bell, does that bell mean something?
Yeah, we have to go back or do something, and then we'll come back after a while.
Okay.
So,
Communities, they make communities stronger, healthier, and community in its broadest sense, because they may choose to live here in Portland, they may live some other place, not only in the country, in the world. The more informed they are, the better educated they are, they make the world a better place.
go.
In what ways are you making your community a better place?
Helping young children to receive a good education, to ensure that they're healthy, they will grow up to be healthy adults, smart adults, and they will help make the world a better place.
Is there things that you feel that are still unfinished?
A lot, yeah. I think that we don't give young people like yourselves the kind of education that you deserve. I think you deserve a much higher quality education. I think that when you were in grade school, that we should have helped you to learn at least 1, if not 2 additional languages. I think that we should have given you a much better math and science background when you were in grade school. I think we should have introduced you to a lot of different occupations when you're in grade. What do I mean by that? In other parts of the world, when you're in grade school, they begin to introduce you to different occupations. Like they'll take you on a field trip to see a huge factory that develops jet engines, or they'll take you into a hospital, you can see what a surgical ward looks like, so that you get some idea of what you might want to be at an early age, and that way that can help form what you study in school. We do it backward. We don't introduce you to different occupations. We wait till you get in high school, then you get in college and say, what do you want to do? Well, what have you been exposed to? So I think that we don't approach education in a way that is helpful for young people. I don't think that perhaps I think that we might do a better job with healthcare, but right now you've got close to 50 million people who have no healthcare, which is horrible, which means that they don't live healthy lives, their children don't live healthy lives, and they end up costing society a great deal of money. So I think that there are a lot of things that we don't do well. The fact that we sat back and watched all these people lose their homes in the last 2 or 3 years, we could have prevented that. So I think that yes, there's a lot that needs to be done to help young people get a far superior education than we provide now, far better. And that I think would be the number one. That if we just did that, and didn't do anything else, we would be a much better, smarter society very quickly. If you didn't do anything, if you didn't change anything else, just made sure that every child got a superior education, you could change what's occurring very quickly.
Thank you. What is it like being the director of Head Start?
It's a privilege. It really is a privilege because I get to do what I like. I like what I do. I like working with people who are working with children. I like working with parents. And as I said earlier, that you actually are able to do something immediately that will have a positive impact upon a child's life. So it's a rare privilege for me, very, very rare privilege.
What?
I'm lucky to have this opportunity. I know that. I'm lucky that I have a job that I go to that I like. Frequently, I'm able to work from home. If I have to do writing, I'm not the kind of person that can write well or think well when there are a lot of other things going on. When I was a kid, my sister could watch TV and do homework. I couldn't. I have to be in a place where it's quiet, no distractions. So if there's something like if we're working on a grant, our program is, I think it's about a $12, $13 million program. We serve over 1,000 kids. So you have to write grants to continue getting that money. So if I have to write a grant, I can't do it. I would never be able to do it with this. I hear the voice, I can hear the door open, I hear all that. I have to be in a place where it's quiet. So I'm able to do work from home. How many people get to do that? Right. So I know that's a privilege. I'm able to say, okay, this is how I think we can change our services for children. The Mandarin that I mentioned, that I'm able to influence our program, and we begin to do that. The same thing about the college. I'm able to influence. I have to convince people. I can't just say, this is what we're going to do. I have to sit down and talk like this. Say, here's what I think we should do this. Here are the benefits that I think children will have. I think families will have, and here's what I think we should do. So that's a privilege. That's truly a privilege.
What are some of your major accomplishments?
When I first worked with this program, when I first came to the program, it served 123 children. Now we serve 1,000 children. I'm very proud of that. When I first came to the program, the only children we served were 3 through 5. Now we serve children birth through 5. I'm very proud of that. I look at people who are parents who we've trained who now work for our program, who are parents. I'm very proud of that. That's a career that they now have. That if they continue to work, and if they're in the classroom, we pay for people to go to college, they're able to get a degree, and they have a career in front of them now. So I'm very proud of that.
Do you feel like you were born to do this job? Like, was this job planned for you to do something for you to do when you were older?
I don't think so. I think that the influences I shared earlier, but that molded me when I was young, my grandparents, the people around me. But I'll tell you something funny. My grandmother and my mother, when I was your age, they used to tell me, you make a good teacher. I said, I don't want to teach. When I was your age, the thing that I really loved to do was, we had an electricity class where you learned how to wire buildings and houses and stuff like that. I loved that. I loved working with my hands. I loved to be able to put some wire up. You got a switch over here to make the light come on, put in double switch. I loved it. So I thought I would have a career in that area. Senior in high school, called electronics technology. You got the little wafers, right? Before the wafer was a transistor, that's a big deal. Before that, there's a test tube. You probably never heard of that. The old radios, they have what they call in the back. They have what they call vacuum tubes. That was before transistors, and that's where you got the juice for it to make the radio work. Well, then they had transistors. We really thought we were doing something then, so I learned about that. I took that course 4 hours a day, every day, as a senior in high school, and then when I was a freshman in college, I took the same course, 4 hours a day, every day, 5 days a week. So I thought that that would be the field I would go into. But I found very quickly, as the more deeper you got, you really had to know trig. And math was not my strong suit. So I saw that this is not going to work because I really don't have the trig background. As guys, you ever heard of a firm called Texas Instruments?
Mhm.
TI?
Yeah.
Okay. Guys who went through our program could almost walk into a job down in Texas, that's where it was headquartered then, and get a job in this new field, involve transistors and all this other stuff. I just lost interest, and still at that time, I never thought of myself being a teacher. As life unfolded, when I mentioned that we started the school here in Portland, well, that's what I ended up doing. When I first started, I was one of the teachers. I've never had an education course in my life. I try to learn from smart people, figure out what is the best way to help somebody else learn, and learn from the very best that I know. But no, I never at no point did I say that I was born to do this. I don't think so. It's something that I learned along the way.
If you could stop the abuse of kids, what would you do? How would you stop it?
Do a better job of educating people when they're your age. This is, when you think about it, probably in your lifetime, there's a high probability that you will be responsible for raising children. How much time are you taught when you're in school how to raise children? Right. That seems kind of ignorant, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And when you have a child, that's going to be almost 18, 20 years at least. You're going to be spending, so we don't do it. We should spend time when, at your age, to be perfect. We talk about, here's what's required to raise a kid. Here's how children develop. Here's some things that will help you with a child. Here's some things that won't help you. When children misbehave, which we all do, here's some ways you can work with them without getting a strap and beating them to death that will really help them to correct the behavior. Here's what you do when a kid gets sick. I mean, those are the kind of things that we should be teaching at your age, but we don't. So that's the problem. We just don't educate people. You can learn how to fix a car quicker than you can learn how to fix a kid. They have classes for that. You can learn how to work one of these gadgets quicker than you can learn how do you work with a baby when you want them to get potty trained. That's the most common thing. Why don't we teach people how to do that? Everybody has to kind of figure it out on their own. Crazy.
What are the kids like in Head Start?
What you may want to do at some point in time is we have a Head Start program here, right here in your center, at your school. Go visit sometime. May want to volunteer. They're curious. That's what I always dig. Young children are very curious, and they want to touch. They want to feel. That's why they get in trouble, right? Stop, don't. But they also, it's the perfect time to teach them. Perfect. You think about this. This is when you really want to teach languages. No matter where a child is born in the world, they will learn the language. Not because they go to school, but because they hear it. They hear it when they're inside their mother. So they hear this and they learn, and they have not gone to anybody's school. They can learn multiple languages at an early age. And a kid that's 1 month old, if they hear multiple languages, they can distinguish between the languages. They may not be able to speak, but even when they make the little boo sounds like that, they are trying to imitate the different languages that they learn. So that's what's always fascinating to me, is how much children can learn at an early age. There's no reason why we can't teach children to read when they're 3 and 4. No reason. Just us, the old folks, too dumb to try. And some of us think, oh, they're just kids. You don't need to teach them that. Well, come on. That's pretty smart if you think about it. No matter where I put you as a baby, if I put you in Russia, if I put you in Africa, if I put you in Indonesia, you will learn the language.
Like help them with their reading?
Yes, they do. Absolutely. Sure they do. Yeah, we do. We have volunteers who come in and do that, yes. We'd love it if you all decided to do that. We'd love it. Just let us know. It's right down the hall from you. I think it's across from the cafeteria somewhere. Is that where it is?
Yes, like
Yeah, like right
over
to the
corner.
left. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I love it. It's a field that's going to develop even further in your lifetime, because old people like me finally figured out if you give children these experiences earlier, they'll be far more likely to be successful when they get to be adults. That's the research. That's true. So it's going to grow in the years to come. And you can do a lot of different things. Like this, in the classroom, you can help manage a program. You can be in the classroom. You can develop the curriculum that everybody uses. You can develop software for children. That's a big field now. Developing software for kids. We have computers. All of our Head Start classrooms the last 20 years had 3 computers in which we introduced kids to computers. We figured this is going to be a part of their lifetime, right? So introduce them to computers early so they can be familiar with computers, kind of protect them.
Any struggles or obstacles?
Yes. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yes. In this position, Head Start, yes. I mean, people. The biggest, I must say, has been Congress in Washington, D.C. There have been efforts made by Congress to cut out this program. And we've had to fight. We've had to organize Head Start parents across the country to get in touch with their members of Congress and tell them don't do that. Really, the reason Head Start is still around, I believe, the members of Congress have tried to get rid of the funding. We organize parents. Parents have fought to protect this program several different times. I've seen it. You would say, get in touch with members of Congress who don't do this. And it's amazing. It's just amazing to see, because a lot of times, smart people politically say, oh, people who don't have much money, they're not interested in politics. They don't get into, that's not true. People get interested in things that they think mean something for them. And I've seen over the last 20, 30 years, parents rally to fight for this program. I remember I was invited to take part in a rally in Los Angeles about 10 years ago when President Bush was trying to hurt the program. There had to be, on the Saturday, steps of City Hall of LA, about 6,000 parents. It's on Saturday who rallied to keep this program. Big rally in Puerto Rico. They had 10,000 parents who turned out to protect Head Start. We had rallies all across this country. Parents primarily coming up fighting to say, no, don't do anything to harm this program. So, that's the biggest threat that I've seen, is from legislators. I've seen it happen. The current governor we have now, when he was governor before, he tried to cut Head Start funding. And we were afraid he might try to do it again. That's why the legislature meets in January. We really have to stay very close to what he made, because he's going to present a budget, and he may present a budget in which he wants to cut the funding for Head Start. And that's going to be another big fight. We had a fight with him in the last legislative session about this very thing. So the biggest fights that I've seen have been from politicians who can influence your funding.
Do you feel the Congress is trying to be involved, or are they trying to take away from Head Start?
Right now, they've been supportive. For the last 2 years, at one point, Congress was trying to, the Republicans in Congress, in the House, were trying to reduce Head Start funding. But now, they are very supportive. At least last year, they supported Head Start funding. So I don't know what the future is. You hear them talking about trying to reach this budget deal, do something about the deficit. And they talk about they may have to make cuts. Well, we're concerned that they don't cut Head Start. So when you hear them talking about, oh, we're going to do something about the deficit, and we're going to have to make cuts. Ours is a program that potentially could be cut, but we're going to have to fight to keep that from happening. Again, it gets back to your question. That's the major threat. That's what happens in Washington, D.C. and Salem with the politicians. Biggest threat.
A couple years ago, I heard about an argument that, like, the government or something like that was trying to cut Head Start because they thought that kids would just learn from, like, Sesame Street or something like that.
Right. Well, then why send them to school? Why send them to grade school? Make us learn from Sesame Street. That's silly. It's absolutely silly. Sesame Street is very helpful, but for anyone to suggest that 1 hour of TV is going to help you for the rest of your life, that's silly. Yeah, you're right. There were people who seriously tried to get rid of this program.
Have you had any complaints from parents about their kids?
Oh, of course. Oh, yeah. Yeah, oh, yeah. The parents, and sometimes parents are right and say you're not doing enough of this, or or you have a staff person that's not treating children where they should be treated. And sometimes parents are right, and we have to help train staff to do better, or we have to ask them to leave the program if they are not going to treat children well. That's one thing we're very serious about. If you don't treat children well as a staff person, we'll try to train you to do better, but if you find out very quickly that you're not going to change what you're doing, we will fire you. It's too important. Kids have one time to get this, and the time they spend with us is too important to be with someone who either doesn't care or they don't want to put the work in to help children do well. It's just too important.
What do you say that also made you a stronger person?
I've heard people say that. Alex, I've heard people say that it makes you stronger. I don't know that it makes me stronger. It does teach me. So that if this comes up again, it's just like if you walk out in that street, in this crosswalk, and a car is making a quick right-hand turn, and you have to jump back to keep from getting hit, right? Well, guess what you do the next time you get ready to go out a crosswalk? You're going to look that way, right? It's the same thing. I've learned from a variety of things that were not designed to help the program or me. I learned from it. So when something similar happens again, I look for that car coming around the corner. I don't know that it makes me stronger. I disagree with that. People say, well, if it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger. I don't know that that's true. It might make you smarter, but it doesn't. I don't know that makes you stronger. You try to learn from it.
Have you ever thought of asking parents for like help, like so like they don't complain, like they act like I'm saying, like like parents complain about the kids are not getting this or that, like how about they give you ideas to help the program?
Oh yeah, they do.
And so y'all don't get complaints.
Oh no, you're always going to get complaints. Jesus got complaints. That's just part of life. That's just part of it. That doesn't bother me. We have what we call a parent policy council, with parents. I just had a meeting Tuesday night with parents, representatives from all of our sites. And sure, you let the people know at the center, but also if you think we're not moving quickly enough to get something done, call me. Let me know so we get a chance to try to fix it. But that's just part of it. I mean, if you work with people, no one is perfect. No organization is perfect. We make mistakes. Just let us know what the mistakes are and we'll try to fix them.
Do you feel like so many experiences that you had, you think you can still learn from what you're doing?
Every day. Absolutely every day. It's like I'm learning from you all. I'm getting ideas just talking with you all. Absolutely. You can always learn, always. And I do. I absolutely do. I try to at least. That's why I was talking about different reading publications that you normally. I mean, I love these. When I was on your age, I used to subscribe to Sports Illustrated. Loved it. But as I grew older, I also had to begin to make myself read Time Magazine, Newsweek. And when I travel, the first thing I'll do before I get on a plane is go pick up a copy of the New York Times, because I know I'll have, from Portland, you go anywhere, it's going to be about 2 or 3 hour flight, we're so isolated. So that way I have a chance to read it. And like I said earlier, I'll force myself to read the business section. And I'll also force myself to read the arts and leisure section. I mean, when am I going to see a Broadway play? When I lived in New York, I never did. I saw a couple of off-Broadways, but at least I know and have some sense of what's happening around you. You may not ever want to do it, but at least if somebody brings it up, you have some sense that this is what's occurring. I have some sense of what's happening in this museum. I may not get to the Museum of Natural History anytime soon, but at least I have some idea what's going on. So again, it's trying to figure out what's happening beyond just where I am. try.
When you go and visit your your place, like, how does it feel when you walk in seeing your kids smile?
And the parents and the teachers. I had an interesting experience last week. Last week I was in American Samoa. That's about a 4+ hour flight from Hawaii going southwest. That's how 4 hours it is. But it's American territory, so they have Head Start there. I was invited to take part in an early childhood conference there. And they had little 3 or 4-year-old children who got on stage and they sang these different songs in Samoan. There's people there, they speak English, they also have retained their traditional language and culture. Which I thought, this is great that Head Start is being used to help people maintain their culture. These little kids speak the language. They know about traditional dances. The same thing happens here in a lot of Indian Head Start programs here in this country. You know, a lot of Indian languages are being lost because people did not come up with ways in which, well, this country had a policy up until about 1940, maybe 50 places. What they would do is take kids younger than you all. If you lived on an Indian reservation, they took you away from your family and sent you to school somewhere else in this country, sometimes 500,000 miles away, and they forced you to stop using your language. You got punished if you spoke your language. They cut your hair. They tried to force you to lose all your culture and your language. I have met people who had that done to them. I never forget this woman's Navajo several years ago. She was older than me. She talked about how they took her from her family and sent her to this school. And she was one of the few Indian kids, and any time she spoke Navajo, they took a ruler and hit her hand. Every time. And she said, I couldn't speak English, and I was punished for speaking Navajo. That was a policy in this country. So the ability to pass on language for a lot of Indian groups in this country is very difficult. Now Head Start comes in. Here is a perfect vehicle to teach the language to the young. And that's happened. And going in those programs on Indian reservations in which you see the language being transmitted to the young kids at Head Start, the dances, the ceremonies. Head Start programs in Alaska. I've had an opportunity to visit programs way out in Alaska where you have to take you see little bush planes to get there, and they pick you up. There's no airport. Basically, it's where they level out the snow. The plane comes in, they come pick you up in a ski-doo, in a sled, to take you into the community. And there's Head Start, and the kids are learning, and again, they are able to maintain their traditional language. And I think that's what excites me. You asked me, the smiles. Yes, the smiles, but also seeing that people and their culture is being passed on to young children. And I just think that's so important. The language is being passed on to young children. You see elders in the community passing on stories, passing on the world. What's my life story? Where do I come from? And to see Head Start play a role in that, I think it's just fantastic. And I do enjoy that. I just thought I was so privileged. I was sitting there last week and watching this, and I thought, man, I'm lucky. I'm lucky to be able to see this, be a part of it.
Unfortunately, we're out of time.
All right. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure, Alex. Pleasure. Man,
Thank you.
Jonathan's pleasure. Bryce, pleasure. Good luck with the Giants here. Maybe we help turn them around.